Welcome to Te Komiti o Te Mōrearea me Te Tūmaru, the Risk and Assurance Committee for Matamata-Piako District Council. Just a reminder that we are live streaming. Welcome to the members of the public, to the staff members, and also to the committee members. And Matamata-Piako, can I ask if you could open our hui today with karakia, given especially that it's Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. So, kia ora mo tēnā.
Ka te rata tuatahi a kemi ana tēnei kia koe me te tautoko tēnei i omihi ki tēnei ngā tāngata hui tēnei I roto I tēnei kaupapa. Uri atu rā, kia mātou whakaaro ki tō tātou matanui te rangi ki atu kai. Nā inoi, ngā whakamoi te ki ai. Nō reira ke inoi tātou, I runga te ingoa te matu tango te wairua tapu. Mene e te atua kahara o ka tēnei au ponunga tāne, ponunga wahine. E tuahu nei ke mutuaru aku tākaro I te miaka. Tuku whakamui me te whakawhetai tu kia koe mo tau aroha tau manā ke tango katoa I usia nei ki runga mata me te au te pō. Ei te pō kia. Ka inu atu nei kia koe e te atua kia toro atu tauri ngā te whai ki runga te kingi Māori tūheitia po te tau te pō pero tūpiti. E tōna whare kāhui ariki. Rire hau, pai maari. Rātou ana hoki ngā tōri ngā ta whai tori ngā manaki ki runga kia rātou I ngā whānau e pani nei, e tangi nei, mo rātou ko ngaro atu rā I te tiroangi o ngā kanana. Kia piki te kaha te ora te māramatanga ki runga ki rātou. Rātou anō ki ngā kaumātou ngā pui e noho nei ana I runga ngā kāinga, ngā marae potanua I te motu. Te tiro hia a ta whai mai, ia rātou katoa I roto I ngā wā katoa. E te ato kahara o kai inu atu nei kia koe, kia noho tahi nei he wainu mātou tēnei hui. Kia whakakaha a mātou whakaaro a mātou kōrero, kia tūtuki pai ai, te hihia o tō tātou nei kai whakahara. Ko tēnei tino atu nei kia koe e te atua, e runga te whakapono ko koe te kingi o ngā kingi, te ariki nui o ngā ariki. Kai hanga o te rangi me te whenua e honte e korori kia koe. Āmine. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora, Matamata-Piako, kia te whena tō tātou hui o te karakia. Couldn't do without you. So, welcome again, team. We'll start with, I do not believe that we have any apologies. Do we have anyone that might be leaving early? Come on, continue. Any additional business here? No. Any declarations of interest in relation to today's papers? Okay. So I'll move to number 6, which is the confirmation of the minutes of our last hui from the 13th of June 2023. Are there any comments in relation to those minutes? Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder. Oh, may I have a mover?
I'll move.
We've got Joanne and the Adrian. All those in favour? Against? Komana. Carried. Thanks, Kieran. So let's move into our hui team. So item 7.1, which is the chair's update, which I'll take as read. And just the brief summary is that there are 2 areas of focus for it, one being the risks in relation to the long-term plan process and also the review of this committee's performance. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Till the 6th of October. 5th, probably.
I'll just make a comment that it's great that you're able to attend these hui, just to, it refines, reinforces it, brings to your, with your expertise, and that just highlights some of the things to look out for and what's pertinent at the time. So thank you for reporting back on it as well. It's great. Really helpful.
What was it in Wellington? Did you have to go to Wellington, or was it a regional one?
They are online hui, so you can attend from wherever you are in the world. So it's actually quite easy, and they don't therefore no barriers to be able to attend. So I'm privileged to be able to represent Matamata-Piako District Council in that space, and it's also really good learnings for us in making sure these come back to us and to see if there's anything that we might want to potentially pivot as a result of something we might be doing or might not be doing. And then in terms of the comments about the self-assessment, we'll cover that as one of the items further along. So I'm happy. If there aren't any further comments, including yourself, Kevin, can I please have a mover and a seconder? Mr. Gary is moving.
I'll make a second.
And Deputy James is seconding. Kia ora.
Was there a good turnout? Sorry, just on what?
We generally get around, depending on the kaupapa, between 20 and 40 people that are attending. And the one that has been most popular so far has been the Three Waters one. Yeah.
Surprise.
Yes, indeed. Good point. The next item is 7.2, which is the safety and wellness reports. Is Kate? Okay. Perhaps we could go to 7.3 and have Leslie join us for the risk management update. Lovely. Kia ora, Leslie, welcome. So just in, hold on, please.
She's here.
Well done. Kia ora, Kate. Welcome to the Risk and Insurance Committee. We're discussing 7.2 on the agenda, so the team will take the report as read. If you could give us a brief summary of the main points of the report that you'd like for the committee to consider.
So there are quite a few reports attached, and it's a little bit hard to summarise them. So actually what I would like to do is just, I'm glad that you've taken it as read. The main comment I wanted to make is that we have looked at the annual report and set some strategies moving forward. So obviously that's the idea of the annual report, is it informs what we do from here. So the main things that we're working on are focusing on critical risks. And that was an objective from last year as well. Making sure that we have some assurance activities in place for that. So this is in the August update that has only just come out, so unfortunately it hasn't hit the agenda, but I can get the team to circulate that after the meeting. And then also just making sure that the processes and so on that we have in place align with practice. So those are the two sort of overarching strategies that we're looking at for this year that we're in. I don't think there would have been any surprises in the annual report because those things have been flagged up during the quarterly reports anyway. So really it's just a question of whether there are any questions. I'm happy to summarise the work that we've been doing if you'd like me to.
I think we'll go to questions and it might come up from that. So thank you.
Yeah, just congratulate you on, there's a great trend there of reducing, which is always good. And I just wonder, in the part 4, it was like engagement and participation, where staff were asked to do a survey and there was a participation rate of 51%. Is that an increasing participation as well, do you feel, on with safety wellness?
From memory, that's come down a little bit from the last one that we did. The sort of rule of thumb for survey participation is that 50% is pretty okay.
Yeah.
It is quite hard to get people to participate. I am really conscious of the fact that we're only capturing how half of our staff feel. And that's why, particularly if I'm looking at a particular risk, I tend to organise a focus group and get some people in to represent the people who actually do that type of work, rather than relying on something like a survey. So we do quite a lot of that type of engagement, which in some ways is more effective. A survey gives us a good sort of overall feel.
Flavour, yeah. No, that's great. That's a really good way of capturing, by having a focus group. That's a really good thing, because that's what I've made a note here about the average score being 75% and that's 6% on the local benchmark is well done. That is when you're flying above the benchmark, and it's not a target, it's what we need to be. So that's great.
That's credit to the rest of the team, really, not me.
Yeah, but it's a team, and I think too acknowledging that our safety and wellness team has grown over the years too, as we've built capacity in that space. So that's so well done. All right. There's always plenty to work on, I know.
Kia ora, yeah. I was interested in the fatigue There's the third, I think the third graph or second graph, where trending events of observation categories 22-23, and fatigue was one of the major contributors to some of the safety issues, and whether or not they led on to some of that fatigue itself affecting the way that the other graphs and other incidences in the other graphs moved, because it just seems like what are we missing in order to help the staff get over that? That's just too dangerous.
So, yes, I hear what you're saying. The one thing I would say is that part of the reason that you're seeing this reporting looking like this is that those fatigue reports are not necessarily incidents. They're not even near misses. The way we structured our fatigue policy when we wrote it was that anytime somebody works more than 56 hours on call without having a night off being on call, it gets put into the system. So we set the bar quite low on that, because what it allows us to do is then to go in and look at the hours that they've actually done and if necessarily escalate it further. So we're capturing quite a lot of low-level stuff for that. So it's not necessarily telling us that something has gone wrong. I guess it's a way for us to monitor how we're managing fatigue. Having said that, Don and the E-team certainly shared your concern about that, and we've had several meetings since then, actually with the water and wastewater ops manager, to look at what's going on for this team, what can we do. So there's been quite a bit of work going on in that space, and quite a lot of the times that they're woken up is actually due to alarms. So they may still be at home, but having to respond to an alarm. The times that really concern me is if we've had a weather event and people are ending up really having to work quite long hours. So those situations are where we really need to have some sort of good controls in place.
So, Madam Chair, I would agree with what Kate's saying there. We've certainly seen this, and it's in our three waters areas. And we have a system for our water supply called SCADA, and it sets alarms so guys that are on call and maybe sleeping at the night and the alarm goes off, they wake up, they have to do something. Some of those alarms, or a lot of those alarms, have been very low level and can completely be ignored. So what we're trying to do is look at those ones and get them turned off so they don't go between the hours of such and such and such and such. So that then if alarm does go off, it's a critical alarm. And so it's stuff like that we're trying to get to sort through this fatigue stuff.
We do have some new operators as well who will be, if they're not on call already, they will be going on call fairly soon. So this, of course, is the problem as well, as if we start somebody new, we can't put them straight onto the roster to provide that extra capacity. It's always a challenge for this industry, for the water industry, and I know I'm talking to Chris, other councils battle with this as well. It's quite hard to resource for an emergency. Yeah, so it's an ongoing challenge.
Just on that fatigue one, so when you talk about how there are some that might be more concerning than others, what percentage are we talking about that they're more concerning? So are we talking 5%? Are we talking 50%?
So it comes in waves, and typically it would be coincided with a weather event that we would have a few. In the last month, we haven't really been any that have been really concerning. So it is quite variable.
So thank you for that. Just a bit of context. And in terms of what the approach is, were the Health and Safety Committee members satisfied with the approach that's outlined here in relation to fatigue?
I haven't had any comment from them. I guess the operators specifically for those teams tend to be the people who are involved more directly with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, your graph shows that your fatigue management training is very high up on the, if you look at it, you're at 40. It's going to be one of those things that's probably highlighted. I'll go back a bit. I'll go off that if I can find it there. So much here. To me, I looked at the lost lost time injury frequency rate, and that's, you know, that's a very good trend, isn't it? That's coming down. So you've got to be doing something right. But the one that I've highlighted is behaviour reports and angry customers and what have you. That's something that's coming through. But what you've got in here is, you say, you were talking about Firth Tower and the Tower office car park and what have you. Are you having issues with these freedom campers or whatever, or what?
So we had some issues in the car park here with people just coming and kind of living in their vehicle. That has resolved itself. Yeah. The Firth Tower issues, it's not actually the freedom campers that are causing the issue, but the other people coming and pursuing their regular activities in that area. And I think some of that is because it's a little bit outside of town, it's tucked away off the road. There is public toilet there.
Hide.
Yeah. So it's an area that, and we're actually encouraging those staff to just report any issues and also to inform the police on the 105 number if anything like that happens. I just there's that correlation. We've been looking at this freedom camping bylaw and what have you, and whether there is some correlation there.
I think that a lot of the stuff that's certainly worrying us has been the abuse at our frank counters around, the refuse is one thing, but it's not. There is very much an increase in New Zealand today, where we seem to have got more aggressive about some of these things, whether it came out of the Parliament issues or whatever. But it doesn't matter. Like I was, on the phone yesterday, and I didn't mind because I get used to it. So a lady screaming and shouting at me about a subdivision next door. Now it was a perfectly normal subdivision, 800 square metre sections. Exactly what you would expect, but she decided she didn't want it there, and she was screaming and shouting. And at one other staff, they passed it on to me. She screamed and shouted. So it's just become quite abusive over the last period of time. It's always been there a little bit. Like I've been in my office and I had a guy threaten to stick me with a knife. He'd been most of his time in prison, didn't matter. And I said, it won't do you much good, and it certainly won't do me much good. And we sort of calmed it down, but it's got worse. There's no doubt about that. It doesn't matter whether it's at the swimming pools or at the, sometimes a little bit in the libraries, but definitely at the front counters, it's become quite distinct.
So we're continuing to work on our controls for that. In fact, just yesterday I met with customer services manager about what else can we do. We're really doing a lot, but certainly our staff are feeling it at the moment. So we're talking about how we can support them better and with there any additional controls that we can put in place. I wonder if I could just comment about the lost time injury rate. The research now is starting to indicate that that's not necessarily indicative of the likelihood of another injury happening. Now, I just have to put that out there, because I know it's nice to look at that and feel like, gosh, we're doing well. And I feel happy because I do feel happy because it means that, somebody's not been hurt, which is good. But in the last month, we've just had a little blip of several injuries. And that's, there's some interesting research that's just come out now that really shows that it's not necessarily a good forecaster of what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's one of the reasons why in the reports I have so little data about injury rates. We used to run, there would be 6, 7, 8 graphs around that subject, but I focus on that less now. But we still do track it.
But we want to have, I've got confidence that you're getting more and more processes and procedures in place. So
I think, sorry, Madam Chair, I think the thing for me that I can say most, because we started off in this journey some time ago with health and safety, didn't we? And it was actually one of the areas under my management at the time. And the hardest thing was getting staff to understand that health and safety was part and parcel of your everyday work. It wasn't this thing over here that Kate did. It is actually part and parcel of your work. And I think we've gone a really long way towards that, haven't we? So now most of the units realise health and safety is part of the everyday activity. And I think that's the good thing for me.
Any other comments? I've got a couple more to make. So one is in relation to, we talk about our health, safety and wellbeing survey, and we also talk about our mental health strategy. So whether there has been any feedback from the team on either of those things that would be worth noting for the committee.
So for the mental health strategy, we actually got together a focus group of 19 people who were interested in it and got their feedback. So that strategy's sort of been based around the feedback that we got from them and also from staff. Like the key, one of the sort of strong bits of feedback we got, well, there were two probably. One was about workloads. We focused very much on looking at how can we make work good for people, as opposed to just focusing on providing support when things are not going well. So that real front-end approach. So two things came up. One was workload, and the other one was the recommendation that we provide some more training for managers around the risks relating to health and wellbeing, mental health and wellbeing. So we've got that coming up, that training. And part of what the trainer is going to cover is actually around helping people manage workload, because we know people are always going to be busy. So I guess it's a question of how we help with managing that.
And just a yes, no on this one. Do we also offer, as well as first aid training, mental health first aid training?
Yes, not to the same extent, but yes, we do.
Thank you.
Just a couple of things, Kate, and I guess that again around those injury incidences, it's not rest on your laurels and say we're doing a good job. It's just keep going, isn't it? That's always the thing is keep tracking. How's it progressing? Like obviously with council, we talked about staff, but we've raised it recently about councillors, and how we're and it's becoming more apparent in the papers now with other neighbouring councils also addressing that issue. So have you, obviously things have you've had with progress there in that space?
Yes, so met with the comms team and the governance support and some wider SPAG team around this, and we've actually put together a risk assessment tool for public meetings, and that's going to be trialled shortly. Sandra, did you want to add anything to that?
Just that we'll be trialling it. We're opening up for our first consultation next week. So we're going to trial a few, what we're expecting not to be any major, but it's a good exercise to go through with our freedom camping bylaw that will come out on Monday.
Yes. So looking at, part of that process will be a briefing so that people know what the plan is before the event starts. And yes, some work around how in this environment, for example, the chair could deal with unruly behaviour. So, yeah.
Okay.
I wonder, does the staff and frontline staff have training and how to de-escalate situations? Is it a normal part of their training? Because I know.
Yes, so when they first start, they would have that with the manager or team leader. And then we have an external trainer who comes in and provides that training. And recently, a couple of months ago, the trainer came and did that for councillors as well, for them to members.
And we give that to our animal control and our monitoring people that are out on the road all the time as well.
I just have one question on the graph that relates to damp strip. It's 2.3 in the report, and we've got close to somewhere between 120 or 140 items that are overdue in that space. I just wanted to get a sense of, out of those ones that are overdue, how long they're overdue, how far. You might have one that was opened in January and it's still overdue in September. So do you have any sense of how bad that is or how good that is?
So some of them will be significantly overdue, more than 6 months potentially. And so one of the objectives that I've set for this financial year is that we're going to get the overdue number down to 50 each quarter, because my concern with this is that you can't see the wood for the trees. It's very difficult for senior management to look at their team's numbers and go, what are the sticking points? So that's my goal,
Thank you.
It's an ambitious one.
Yes, it will be. And do you have a sense of whether there are any incidents or near misses that are occurring that could have maybe been prevented by some of these being closed sooner? That's what my worry is that we're not addressing something and that it'll keep going.
None that I can think of. My sense generally is that if a manager or team leader feels that there's an imminent risk, they deal with that thing quite quickly. So part of the reason that we put things into bold is to make sure they don't get forgotten. So sometimes there are things that need to be done, but they can be lost. So yeah, that's a good way of following that.
Can you give me an example of what might end up there?
So a long-term example that's going to have quite a long completion date might be fencing around a wastewater treatment. It's not something that you can do in a hurry, and sometimes there are things along the way that slow the process down. Sometimes they might be more easier to achieve things like perhaps we've identified that some training needs to be done with the team around a particular risk, and that might have come out of a risk review or event investigation. And then we would put that in as a reactivation and just make sure that it doesn't get lost.
Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll ask for a mover and a second. Yeah, James and okay. Oh, sorry, all those in favour? Obviously, aye. Next up, we have item 7.3, which is the risk management update. Obviously, we're going to take the report as read. We can have a brief summary of the main points throughout the version. So thank you. Just turn my face off.
Good morning. So in terms of the report, the main item that I'm dealing with at the moment is looking at the options for software rather than using the Excel spreadsheets that we're currently using, and there's quite a prolific number of those. So this is, money hasn't been budgeted for it, but we'll budget for it for the next financial year. And it's come down to three options. One is the ProMat that we're using currently. The two others are CAMS, and the one is no risk. So the information has been given to IT to review to see how that impacts on the selection criteria, I suppose. Because seeing the sound, I didn't print out the agenda items, so I'm just trying to recall it from the top of my head. Yeah, so it's mainly about the funding. Yeah, I think that's it.
So clearly, Madam Chair, we need some sort of processes, systems to help us keep track of the risks and all of the rest of it. There are a whole lot of systems out there. We've come down to about 3 now. It's a bit of testing and seeing which ones are going to be most appropriate for us. And of course, making sure we have the resources in the budget to cover those costs. That's going to help us along the way of managing our risks in a better way.
So part of the selection process will be a pilot, a shortlist of one, so we get a team of people who will use the software to be involved in the pilot. And the other item is the risk report that's being proposed. I'm wondering whether, because
there's just so much activity on by making a report that's got a lot of detail in it. It's adding to people's workload. So do I trim back on that? And maybe just use a graphical picture rather than more additional information about controls and that make up the risk rating.
Thank you. I'm going to open the questions. Yeah, Adrian?
It's good to hear, Excel spreadsheets, you can have them for China, can't you? And all you look at is numbers and columns and so I can appreciate that. That would be quite good to have a program. What other councils is there?
There's a variety. So CANS is used by a number of councils. ProMed is used by some as well. No Risk is in there because it's one I've used in the past. So I'm quite familiar how that works and what the expectation is from other software as a result of that.
So I guess it's the feedback from the other councils as to how usable, friendly it is and how it sort of integrates into a council system.
So ProMap is the system we've got for all of our other stuff. So obviously if we can use the same one, it'll align better, but it's got to work.
Yeah.
So I would just at this point, Madam Chair, say that, I see risk is on sort of the same journey that health and safety was. We've got it in. Leslie's been spending a lot of time on appetite and risk profile and all that sort of thing. And so now the next step is to move into more staff training and training with councillors and whatnot, and then to keep moving forward. So I guess our journey is relatively new at this stage, and we're sort of trying to push ahead as best we can, quick as we can.
Have you got any indication of cost of these programs?
Yeah, probably on an annual basis, it's around about 50k. But if we go with a software that we're not using currently, there will be setup and training, which will be add another.
The one-off cost. It's,
yeah.
But otherwise 50k a year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I didn't know whether you wanted to talk about risk appetite at all.
We'll just see the questions that come up and then we might have it in a minute.
Okay.
Just one thing I agree with you about, I think that the least information, but that shows the risk or where it should be and how urgent it should be what we see, or what I would consider that what we see. And for all the other information, if you have a drop-down list, so do you have a policy, then drop it down, rather than you put the work into, putting all the information out there and about 1 out of 10 people, if we're lucky, read it. Yeah, because I think the work is in the assessment and making sure that you know what the trend is and what we need to do. So I really support that. In terms of the risk appetite, when I look at it and I look at what should I'm not sure exactly what that measure is. Like I kind of read and I kind of get it, but I don't get it entirely. So would you just explain that to me? I might be the only person in the room that doesn't get it entirely.
No, it's
You're far from alone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So risk appetite is about the tolerances and measures that you put in or have in place to indicate how risk is going. So if you have take the industrial land project. So what was the appetite of the council for the purchase of that land that made this to go ahead with a quick decision to buy it versus, what are the issues about buying it? So how much risk are you willing to take on? So that was one where you were willing to take on a lot of risk in order to take advantage of an opportunity. So it's about opportunity as well. So if there's an opportunity that's presented, if you go through the risk appetite, that puts some measures and tolerances around making that decision.
So Adrian, the risk appetite is determined by you, by the council?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And we tend to be risk adverse
Okay.
because it is the public
Yeah.
pot of money. So we tend to weigh onto the risk adverse side rather than the taking a risk.
Opportunity.
Yeah, and the opportunities, I guess, are offset by how you mitigate those risks.
Yes, exactly.
That's the key, is that if you go through the process and you're willing to take the risk because you know that if it doesn't play out, that there is that it's not a significant, you can mitigate it to a point that it's not going to be a bad consequence from it as best as you can.
So it's, for projects and things like that, it's going to put a lot more boundaries around, how it should be managed to ensure that we stay within our appetite.
Thank you.
I do think there's still a lot of work and training to go in this area.
Yeah.
That's moving forward. Next few months, we're going to have to get into that. But at the moment, it's just trying to get together her understanding and her setup of it ready to go for start planning.
My question on this is in relation to the role of the Risk and Assurance Committee. So I see our role as we see what the most significantly rated risks are in or across the council's activities. We look at those and we get a sense of whether we think that's covering all of our activities and whether the mitigations that are in place will actually reduce the risk to council in terms of those particular activities. And so what's happening at the moment is there are what I would call mushrooms all over the place of risk registers, on Excel spreadsheets everywhere, and it doesn't give us a true sense of where any of those significant risks may sit, so that we can review them, we can be comfortable that they've been described appropriately, and also that there are mitigating factors in place that we are comfortable that they're actually doing the mitigation to reduce the risk in terms of likelihood and the consequence. So I understand ultimately that we are on a journey. What I'm worried about is sometimes these journeys take a very long time, and in the interim, we might not have the visibility we need to give that assurance to council. So I know that you're doing everything that you can, but we also need to be mindful of what our role of the Risk and Assurance Committee is to provide assurance to council that the risks are being identified and they are being mitigated. So we just need to find that balance and what that could look like. And it's really good to see in the report some of the project risks that are coming through, so it gives us a sense of what's out there. And so is there a strategy or an approach that we can take to identify different risks and different pockets of activities throughout the council, going, well, now there's too many, or can we just focus on a particular area and go, well, we think this one is risky, can we see a risk register that's happening in relation to that, just to get some runs on the board to create some visibility for us. So just a comment.
And just following that before you answer that question, knowing about something after it happens, like the purchase of that land, and knowing that you went through the mitigating circumstances, I have to admit, being on this committee, that I was not aware of some of those issues that might be issues that we take forward in kind of every look at what we do when we're either purchasing something significant like that quite quickly. And the committee may have had a different opinion, which would have added to the discussion at the council table. But so I'm reporting, or I'm making a decision on information I know, not information I don't know, which is not helpful to you in some ways.
So we get it. We get that there's work to be done. Maybe Leslie and I, we need to come up with a plan of these are some of the areas that the Risk and Assurance Committee might want to see the risk registers for, so that we can get some level of assurance of what's going on in the interim while we are searching for a tool that will bring them all together. Because in my mind, like I mentioned at the last hearing, it's going to take at least 1.5 to 2 years. So I'm just, in the next 1.5 to 2 years, we're potentially blind. I'm not seeing some of the activities from the risks in relation to those activities. Councillors might see it because you might see it coming through council more regularly, but Joanne and I might not see that. And our role is to really provide assurance in that space. So I'm happy to take an action that Leslie and I have a hui to see if there's anything that we can do, and maybe bring a couple of items or one area each time, just so we've got some visibility.
I think it'll also come down to the software in a way, and how easy it is to implement and get the scope of what we want to get out of it set up. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm just really supportive of what you've suggested. It's a good belt and braces approach in the meantime. You know, we haven't got the belt, we haven't got the braces yet, and the belt sort of doing the job. So I think we'll give it a bit more. I think that would probably support you more too, Leslie, wouldn't it, in the work that you do?
Yeah.
And so it's really helpful.
Okay, so the recommendation is to receive the report and also for an action for us, I guess, to catch up and then deliver some kind of work plan of the risk that will come in front of the Risk Insurance Committee meetings over the next period. By Joanne moving and sorry, is that Bruce?
Yes.
Yeah.
I apologise for that call. Yes.
Cool. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Good one, that carries. Thank you so much, Leslie. Oh, thanks, Kevin. Good one. Thanks, Leslie. We'll be meeting soon. Excellent. 7.4 on the agenda is the transformation team update. I think that's all. Welcome, Kelly. If we could have a brief summary of the report and then open for questions. Thanks. We'll take it as read.
Perfect. Morning. As you'll see in the report, it's covering 4 key areas. So the transformation team looks after the 3 reforms, just keeping an oversight of that and making sure that we're on track, doing everything that we can, keeping ourselves informed, and also our Takatu Matamata Future Ready organisation review. So there's a bit of an update there about what's happening there. We're now at the point that we have made a final decision on our high-level org design, and the decision being there that we're now going to move from 3 group managers to 5 group managers, and they're currently advertising those roles, and we will shortly move into the detailed organisation design phase as well, and being mindful that we've got these reforms moving alongside as well. So just looking to manage all of that. I have highlighted in there a key risk around the LTP. So if you've got any questions about that, we've also got Lania in the room here who's come in just to support and answer anything there, because that's I guess, one of the key risks we've got right now. I see in Leslie's report, she's also highlighted some of the other risks that we've highlighted in our risk register for the transformation team. But at the moment, obviously, with this, it's LTP time, and we've also got this uncertainty around the reform. So this is just an area we're trying to manage at the moment. And I'll hand it over to you to ask any questions.
Any questions? Kevin, any questions?
Uncertainty, isn't it?
Yes, just looking at that, gone up quite a bit too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, certainly with the election and some of the things that we're looking at are just holding a little on that. Certainly, True Waters Resource Management Act, a number of those issues are going to be determined what comes out of October.
It could just blow your plans out of the water.
Mm. We've tried to, especially with our reorganisation, you know, the question was always asked, why didn't we put Three Waters aside and so that they could be taken off later on? But I think you need to understand, to put Three Waters aside, that means you also had to take people out of finance and people out of communications, because they would all be part of that. And so it just seemed to create too much uncertainty at the time when we were uncertain by the outcome. Now it's looking like sort of 25, 26 before we get to some decision. So that's why we kept Three Waters in there and kept it as part and parcel of the process moving forward.
Yeah, I think from a council's perspective, it's just highlights how difficult it is to be working in this space at the moment, and I can't overstate that. And so to have some kind of plan in place, you know, it's like you can either fail to plan and plan to fail, you know, like it's that thing. So I think there's been a lot of work, a lot of thought put into this to take us forward. So commend you for that, Kevin.
Just got one general comment, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So given that all councils are impacted by these reforms, is there anything innovative that's coming out of the LGNZ space, CoLab, somewhere else, that this transformation team could be considering if they aren't already? Or is there something that has come out of those spaces that we're actually doing as a result of that?
Yeah, Collate did start a project called Right People, Right Place. The idea of that was about, so they've actually got two projects. There's that one there about getting the right people into council, because it's difficult to recruit, but they've also got another one which was to do with if there was any, for want of a better word, stranded overhead, if there was any additional staff that we could utilise and share amongst ourselves as a result of the reforms. That one has been parked, in particular given the certainty. But the Right People, Right Place one, that's certainly, I think that's really useful to try and help us to get people in the future. I know they've done quite a lot of space in the building cluster group there. So it's identifying where we're really struggling to be able to fill roles and what they might do to help us there, and also tying that in with Taitura in terms of how we can actually raise the profile of local government and to be able to get more people on board, and even at the level of at colleges and things like that, actually making it a career opportunity. Anything else that's innovative? Not that I can think of at this point, but I guess we're always looking at opportunities to be able to share. Yeah, nothing else that I can really think of. You know about e-learning and all those other things that we've got in place. So,
just so that you know that I read this, one of the things that my comment to myself was that it's hard to make any decisions when you don't know what's going to happen. And your hands are tied. And I thought you can appreciate the work, appreciate the staff being kept on because you don't know whether you need them, whether you need more of them, less of them, or do now that the election, everything's kind of running down until the politicians make, like whatever the government will be or who that might be. And so I appreciate the work that's been done in this area, but I kept going and I thought, gosh, if they make this decision, then this is going to affect this and that's going to affect this. So I appreciate the work in this area. Yeah, that's the only, and I see that it's one of the things that was said was hard to mitigate risk when you don't exactly know where it's going to come from if the decisions are made or if they're not made. So, to the team.
I think that's the difficulty around the LTP in particular. And the team have got some good strategies that they've got in place there, as you'll see outlined in the report.
That's good. So the recommendation in front of us is for the report to be received. Could I please have a mover and a seconder? Adrian moving. And also thank you. The next item on our agenda is 7.5, which is the quarterly procurement report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe Fiona.
Oh, we're just
changing it.
She knows the hard questions.
Yeah.
Riveting meeting.
There's some work to do.
Yeah.
So welcome. The report is taken as read. If we could have a brief summary of the main points for our consideration, then we'll open up the questions.
Morena, thank you. I'll take you through the report. So the procurement report summarizes the procurement compliance performance over the third and the fourth quarters. The compliance performance has been categorized into three classifications: pass as procurement meets compliance requirements; caution as procurement has moderate areas of non-compliance, which is increasing the risk to the council; actions required, procurement has multiple areas of non-compliance or recurring non-compliance. Having a look at the result of the third and the fourth quarters. So in the fourth quarter, 50% of the procurement that we've done meets audit requirements. In comparison to the 2021 and 2022 financial year, this has actually decreased by 6%. Looking at procurement which has moderate areas of non-compliance, quarter 4 percentage is 28, which in comparison to last year has decreased by 3%. 22% of procurement has multiple areas of non-compliance, and in comparison to previous year's financial year, performance has increased by 9%. Representing on non-compliance by thresholds, so 5 to 20,000 thresholds records higher percentage of non-compliance, which has been classified as moderate non-compliance. some of the things that have contributed to this high percentage, 78% of non-compliance into this threshold, is basically seeking insufficient quotes or not attaching quotes on the system when doing the purchase order. There has been a high percentage of splitting of orders to avoid undertaking RFQ processes. There are more reasons as like specialized procurement processes are not followed, and POs raised against the contract in the register. Looking at the purchase order transactions, so there have been 4,477 purchases raised in Q4, and the higher percentage is under the area of 5%, under the 5,000 threshold, and in high percentage, which shows us 92% of orders were raised under 5,000.
Sanjita, I might stop you there.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
it.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking, I think she's close to the end. So I appreciate that. It's really good to have you highlight those to us. Do we have any questions in relation to the book?
I had, the split when organisations, and I gather you're talking about organisations splitting the purchase orders or so that you can get both of them under a particular threshold as opposed to having to get it. I gather the higher ones are more rigorous in terms of how you look at them. Does that often happen?
That has been something that has been reoccurring.
And so what do you say, have we got anything that we address the companies with or about that? Because, I'd slide in four invoices under 20,000 because it's not rigorous under 5,000, but it is at 20,000. So, and if it's a common practice, do we, and they as an organisation that we use all the time, is that not a discussion between management and the organisation?
So through you, Madam Chair, we do pick them up. We do regularly pick them up. And so when we pick them up, we go and talk to the individual, we talk to the company that it's happening with, and we're now putting in processes to flag earlier. So each one is picked up, each one is addressed with the staff member that's concerned. Sometimes we find that they've done that because they've been in an emergency situation or something's had to be fixed urgently.
So it's the consequences of doing it. Is there a consequence if right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
definitely a consequence of doing them, and sometimes and they're also reported through to the executive team to ensure that what's happened is had a second set of eyes over it to be assured that the procurement has been required at that point in time. We are in the process of, and you'll be seeing that hopefully when Sangeeta gets her feet a little bit further under the desk, there'll be a new procurement policy that will be coming out, and we are looking at some of the thresholds which may need amending given costs and prices, etc., etc.
Well, so one of the you suggested there was a need because of an urgency or whatever. All right. So I would foresee it would be a case of going to the above and say, hey, I've got to do this. I'm going to do it anyway. Is there something that stops it being done? Is part of the procurement you can't do something? You go back to this splitting, splitting a 20,000 into four or 5,000. Is there something that physically does stop you from doing the 21 at 20?
Generally speaking, the manager. So that can't happen without that it's been one up for somebody else to have a look at it. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that, sorry, I'm just going to jump in on that one. Does our procurement policy specifically prohibit PO splitting?
No.
And that will be addressed with the review of the policy later on this year?
Yes.
I do have and it's going the other way. 4.2 top suppliers, and you come up with pest management with 348 transactions, and we're highlighting this is this highlighting that we should have a contract in place rather than individual
Purchase orders
or whatever. Is that what?
Anything over $100,000, generally speaking, in spend is a good opportunity for us to review and see if there should be and can be a contract put in place.
This is 59. Yeah. This is tiddlywinks, but it just I'm trying to understand the
So I guess the aim of that is to get a better price. That's ultimately what this driver is. I think we all need to understand what it is we're driving here, because obviously we get value. I guess the other thing with splitting is other consequences of using another party is there. But I guess we've got policies in behind there to support that there is a process to some degree, that it's not a mate getting a job, or because that's always where there's a conflict. Could be quite that would be a way of addressing it as well.
Yeah, and generally when we dig behind the splitting, it's because there's been some form of issue in terms of there's a timeliness to do the work.
Yeah. I see. I'm quite concerned, I guess, around the observations, where the general observations and analysis of procurement indicates reactive works, community demand, political pressure, and staff capacity. So I guess that there's a few challenges there, and I guess around political pressure coming from the council lords is understanding the consequences. Perhaps needs to be raised at a governance level.
Political pressure is in terms of the council.
Whether potentially it's where something's seen as there's a certain party in the community wants something done, or they come in and we agree to do it. It could be ad hoc. It could be an ad hoc decision, which I've tried to eliminate.
Because it would still have to fall into the rules of the procurement planning, no matter who comes through the door, right?
It should.
The process will still have to.
But I guess that's where community demand and political pressure are there's an expectation of doing things faster. And because we have a structural process, that's where we get caught. And this often there are times when councillors want something and staff, want to please. This is the thing. That's the genuine position we're in, is we want to do stuff, and staff do too. And so this is where the risks of how processes aren't necessarily followed to the letter as they perhaps could be. So it's just highlighting that point.
Fiona, do you feel comfortable enough that if I want a project done and Adrian comes in and she wants a project done and Gary comes in and wants a project done, that you can, because you're in the position that your team is in the position that they are, that you can hear that? I mean, community will come to the door and say, why don't we do this right now? That you can still consider the options, like the council might say, this has become our priority, so that's a different kind of set of rules. That all three of our projects still have to go through no matter that we're demand, and we want it to happen and the community wants it to happen, but they still have, you feel confident enough, your team feels confident enough to say, we need to put a hold on this for a minute because this is happening, or it doesn't quite comply.
I'm very comfortable because we have very good systems in this organisation to be able to ensure that we're collective and collaborative in our decision making, but also in our prioritisation. And it's very difficult when you're, managing under the current financial environment that we're having to make trade-offs all the time. And we can only do that if we're communicating and having those conversations with you. Otherwise, we'll be at odds. And unfortunately, our communities do want gold-plated. They don't. And we're having to balance the budget, the need, and do the best we can in the current situation that we're in. And because we do have that communication and structure in place, I'm very, very comfortable that we can actually manage competing priorities, but we do that in discussion with you so that we're all very clear on the choices we make.
So our procurement policy, we're looking to encourage the use of local suppliers. So I'm looking at the geographic spend here. Are we ensuring the risk of it costing more, or how do I explain this? Are we still being competitive by staying local, or are we risking having to spend more to achieve that? Do we have any idea?
It's a very tricky, subjective conversation, but what I would say to you is that what we do know is that if we can buy local and stay local, we will. And in terms of whether that is competitive or not, because we have the ability to see lots of rates from different suppliers, we can tell you that what we're seeing in those rates is competitive with our local.
You're quite comfortable with. I'm comfortable with buying local. I just So we're still competitive.
Yes.
I might just ask a couple of questions about the actions in relation to what we see here. So it's great to have this level of reporting so we can see what that looks like. Quite clearly, we have issues with approvers in a couple of ways. One being in terms of the PO splitting, and another being in terms of making sure that we don't have these red ones coming through. So what additional measures will be taken to support approvers so that we don't have as much PO splitting and we don't have as many in the red or even in the amber? Or have they had as much as they can get?
So I believe it's more of providing them the training and knowledge around the procurement area on when they should be pressing the button to pass a PO and when they should be encouraging their staff by rejecting the PO and saying that this is incompliant and this is what you do in order to be compliant to policies and processes.
Thank you. And then the second part of it, which is around the report that says the top 10 suppliers by transaction. So that data is just, for my understanding, 6 months of the year. And there are nearly four that are over that 100,000 threshold that would normally require a contract. So are we going to expedite contracts in relation to these types of suppliers as a result of the data?
Or should there be an inflation adjustment because the cost of doing these things has increased? So there has to be some kind of indexing there around value, would there be? Just the light bulb moment, indexing.
So it's a very interesting conversation that you raised. It's one I've been having for nearly 25 years. So
it'll be easily resolved.
So just so that you're aware, the $100,000 threshold that was set in terms of if the trigger point to go out to contract was actually set by, was it Trans Fund or can't remember the previous, but it was currently officially effectively Waka Kotahi, and they set that $100,000 limit. That's when the trigger for local authorities to put things out to contract at least 25 years ago. So there's been lots of conversation around changing and moving that threshold, but to date we have had no traction of being able to do so. I think Waka Kotahi have moved that threshold to $250,000 today, but we have not done that at this point. So historically, moving that $100,000 would be very difficult, but it probably should be.
Well, we have an opportunity with the review of our procurement policy, right? So when we talk about nearly 72% of our transactions under $1,000, that's a lot of work that is done by potentially the finance team and other teams. And it's not even 5% of our spend. So hopefully the review of the procurement policy, which I'm guessing will come here, will address that. So thank you. If there aren't any other questions, I'd like to thank the team for the report, and the recommendation is to receive the report. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Joanne. Yep. And Kevin is second. Thank you, Kevin. And
you're welcome.
Is the quarterly project management compliance report 7.6 to be taken as read. Over to project Rachel. Okay, here, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Okay, so this is a brand new report to council. We've implemented the framework, the processes, the templates, tools, all that sort of thing. It's designed to be able to audit at any stage of a project, so not just at the end when it's too late, to try and bring things back on track. It's split into the 4 areas of a project, so initiation, planning, delivery, and finalising them, and then within those, you've got the areas of your costing, your scope, your quality, your HR, and everything else. So it's all been broken down into those different areas. The audits that I've done so far have predominantly, well, they've all been done on the initiation and planning of projects, because it's new and we're starting out. And so far it's been really good. There's been a positive pretty much in every area. So I go through, audit them all, then meet with project managers, go through, give them some advice and guidance on how to bring it back on track. So overall, so far, it's working so far.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Comments?
Just in terms of the project, the initiate, plan, deliver, finalise, do you have a review of that when you're finished, which is quite different from the audit, when you deal with the audit in there too early, just so that if it's new, then there might be things that you're learning along the way that you might be able to add to any of those sections, or you find that it's not necessary?
Yeah, no, but each time when I meet with the project managers and go through things, like asking for their feedback too, like what's working, what's not working, what can we look at to change to make it easier or make it better.
What triggers this process? Like, what is it? The value of the project? Is it the like just try to get some clarity?
Everyone struggles with what is a project, what's not.
Yeah.
That's
it's quite subjective.
It will always be very subjective, but basically if you are going to change the way that we do something or do something different to the way we are doing it now, it's best practice to have a business case on your options of why you want to change it. What are we going to do? Yes, no, stay the same. If we are going to change something, it's best done as a project. If it's just a process that we're not changing, it's something that we do and we've done lots and lots of times before, run that through as a process.
Thanks for that, because my question was really around, so do we rely on our organisational awareness to determine whether it's a project or not, and therefore it goes through into the register and then becomes part of the audit population?
Still very subjective, and that will be ongoing thing forever. I think of what's a project, what's not.
In terms of project managers, is there a maximum number of projects that a project manager can have in terms of resourcing?
Resourcing, we're a bit light on. We tend to use what I refer to as default project managers, which is a lot of the time our delivery team. They're totally unaware of what they need, the skills and experience they need to be able to manage something properly, because they're too busy doing instead of need that oversight to pull everything else together. And that's what we're trying to build our skills, because we don't have the capacity.
Okay. And do we have a sense of, in terms of the projects, the three different categories there were achieved, I guess, terminated or redundant? So do we have any stats that give us an idea about our project performance over time, which buckets they fall in?
Not as yet.
Okay.
Yeah, eventually we will get to that point. That would be really nice to
Yeah, because that'd be really helpful information. And then in terms of the achieved one, what are the lessons learned from that to improve our likelihood of success in future projects?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just I'm reminded of one of the few sections that we went in the wellness report about overlapping responsibilities. And so if this whole project work is new, then looking at, counteracting with what kind of pressure you're putting on your staff.
A lot.
And that's a concern because we dealt with the other one first thing this morning. And if this is a whole new set of work, and then you don't have the expertise, so you're relying on the people that do have the skills to be able to bring these projects through. One, it should be shown in your, you'll find your reports at the end, but also I'm concerned that you can have something innovative, but if we lay another layer of responsibility on our staff, just raising that actually.
Yeah, it's not so much. I guess we've always done projects and it's an area that we want to improve on because generally we haven't done so well in the past with keeping them on time frame within cost and figuring out what it is we actually want to achieve by the end of it. So it kind of has gone off the rails. So we're trying to put that within a framework, within a process that staff can follow, and it's not easy and they're going to have to, we don't have the capacity, so it's just trying to build the staff's awareness around it and make it easier to follow.
And can I just add, Madam Chair, in terms of what's the maximum number of projects, it's really difficult because they all have different boundaries. So some of your bigger contracts, millions of dollars worth of work, are far easier to project manage than your littler projects, which require a lot of stakeholder engagement, and that stakeholder engagement takes time and you can't underestimate that. And so it might be that you've got one person managing a multi-million-dollar project over here, and you've also got one person managing a $20,000 project over here, and it's taking up all their time equally the same. So it's very difficult. But generally speaking, anywhere between 3 and 5 projects per person, around the $1 million mark, generally speaking. But there are always variations outside of that takes a project manager far more time.
Thank you. I think it was just coming to what Joanne's comment was, which was around the capacity for people to do things. We've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, I read this entirely. I know it's a new thing. So, what is a project? Is the question. Right. So, I thought, it'll be it'll be putting a new dunny in somewhere, or it'll be doing a roading project, or whatever. But is it? Could it also be a rejuvenation of the library at Morrinsville or something? Would it include that?
Yeah, if you're going to rejuvenate something and change something or change the way that we do things, and if there's a benefit to running it as a project because you want to see what's working, what's not, what we could improve in the future if we're going to do works with that again. Whereas the toilet, we put in a toilet for a toilet's a toilet sort of thing,
It's not a project, it's a project.
Is there any benefit to running every single toilet that we put
but
So that's a good answer. That gives a bit of clarity though, doesn't it? Because if it's sort of business as usual stuff.
It comes business as usual. A toilet might be in a different location, in a different spot, but it's like we want to, some people need a building.
Yeah, I've got to reread this in a new light. That's what I've got to do.
I guess just to highlight the larger projects like the Matamata Stadium, for example, that is led by an external project manager. But there's such, I'm quite proud actually of how the team brought this together because we've got a steering group that has the stakeholders, because obviously with the Ministry of Education, we're talking about stakeholders. This is a good example of a process that I think has got good parameters, and it's probably one of your shining new projects that you're doing, Rachel, is exactly this, is having this project steering group. But then there's the delivery group. So the project manager is in the delivery group with staff, and there's risk, there's funding, there's all those parameters in there, because a lot of the feasibility's already been done. So we've got that delivery, and that project manager then answers to the steering group, which has the stakeholders and there, I think it's a really good example of a structure that should deliver a good outcome, all going well.
So the project manager in that sense then becomes a part of a procurement plan?
Correct.
Yeah, because that project manager needs to manage the scope, needs to manage the quality, needs to manage the risk, needs to manage the procurement. They need to oversee all the different steps. They might not be the ones doing it. They might have a team underneath them doing those separate things, but they need to oversee and manage. And so if something's going wrong here, do something about it. If something's going wrong over here, is that going to affect someone in the middle? Whereas currently we sort of have, you're doing this bit, you're doing this bit, you're doing this bit. And that requires so much communication and it's so hard. Whereas if you have that level above that can oversee that and bring it all together, that's what we're aiming to get to.
Sure, good discussion on that one. Just one final quick admin question. Is a project subject to audit irrespective of the value?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Cool. In front of us, so thank you. The recommendation is that the compliance report is received. Could I please have a mover and a seconder? I'll carry with mover and a seconder. Good, thank you. Thank you also, Rachel. I think you deserve a coffee. Especially you. Niall, are you ready for the final report to the council? Because what we might do is we might look at the risk and assurance at the end, if that's okay, since we've got our Audit New Zealand and Office of the Auditor General colleagues here. Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so
Just in the noise here. So.
Oh, yeah.
Washing out.
What
I
page?
think we can do that.
7.8.
Yeah, so we're going to start with 7.18, which is the final report to council. And welcome to our new tech team.
I'll go there.
So, Chair, in front of us, 7.8, we have the final report to council on the audit for the year ended 30 June 2022, which is taken as read. And Niall, if you don't mind giving us a brief summary of the main points of the report for the committee consideration. And
Sure, I'm just bringing up the report.
While you're doing that now, could we please have an introduction of the members that are joining us today, just so that we can say hello, and we'll be live feeding in a minute, if not already. Claudia, maybe you first, because you're on my right.
Good morning, kia ora. I am Claudia Brink. I'm the audit manager for last year's audit 2022, as well as the 2023 audit and upcoming LTP audit.
Awesome. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Pranay Pansal. I'm the appointed auditor for SDC. This is my second year for the audit. I'll also be the appointed auditor for the LTP audit coming up. So thank you.
Kia ora tātou. I'm Richard Harbert from the Auditor General's Office, so I'm the sector manager covering the White Council and Dave County.
Welcome. Yeah, no, my welcome. Sorry, but Niall, I was just filling to give you some time.
No, thank you. Thank you for your patience while I brought up the report. So this report is the audit recommendations that have arisen from the previous annual report audit process. You'll see that the audit team have provided a range of recommendations, and they have been prioritised against urgent, necessary and beneficial. And you can see that they have included a range of new recommendations in relation to the quality of the performance information, the fraud risk assessment, payroll controls, the impairment assessment, asset registers and reconciliation, variances in our PPE, assets under construction, the local government members' determination in relation to remuneration, and sensitive expenditure. And you can see there that the status also of the previous recommendations that were made in the prior report, and how they have been going in terms of our response. So I think, yeah, I'll effectively just leave it there, Madam Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I might start with one. So just this for our Audit New Zealand team. If there's a recommendation that is raised by yourselves in terms of the audit that you've conducted and the recommendation isn't agreed, does that loiter on the management report for years to come when there's that disagreement?
Madam Chair, so it depends on the type of recommendation, but there is instances where we basically agree that the risk is accepted by council, you are made aware of it, and then we close it.
I'll ask another one. So on page, I thought 3.3.1, it talks about the fraud risk assessment. So other than the timing of the last review of the fraud risk assessment, so that's for Audit New Zealand as well.
Sorry, Madam Chair, what page?
I think it's page 13. So 3.3.1. So
The separate attachment.
yeah, the attachments, yeah. So other than the timing, what are the specific differences between the risk assessment that currently exists for NPDC and what is recommended or required, I guess, and the requirements of the link that you've provided in the report. Are there any deal breakers? Because I noticed in the audit plan moving forward that the fraud risk assessment will be reviewed as part of the audit plan.
I cannot provide specifics on the exact differences, but I think the environment has changed since then, given COVID and moving on to platforms and more IT infrastructure being implemented. That is the main sense of the changes you need to think of, given the guidance from the Serious Fraud Office.
Thank you. Any other questions? I expected us to be noisy on this one. If we don't have any other questions, the recommendation in front of us.
I guess the only thing is there any other feedback, like from your perspective, Noel, around obviously getting these things done, they are going to happen. Like I guess there's been directions here, and we have the capacity to achieve, like with the things that are being reviewed.
Thank you, Mayor Adrian. I've seen many audit management reports, and I take the view that the audit management reports are an opportunity for us to look at how we can improve. I think the lesson we've learned from the past in terms of audit management reports is to be completely upfront about what we can or can't do. So where we say that it is unlikely that we can get certain things done, we've just been trying to manage expectations. But I think it is a very good opportunity and very useful for us on many aspects of the audit, but this as well as to what somebody else would see of our world. And so, there are things in the audit management report that we didn't necessarily agree with big issues, but through the discussion, we saw opportunities to change some things and improve, make our systems more robust. So as the final signer of all the comments in this report, back to audit, I am committed to achieving what we said we would achieve. I think I had a discussion with our auditors at the beginning of this audit and said, look, we won't be perfect. We'd like to be, but we're not, but we will definitely get better. And so, that's my response to that. It's best endeavours, Mayor Adrian, but we do place a lot of importance on these recommendations. We know that the audit process is very, very important for the public integrity of local governments and our council. So, long-winded answer. We will definitely do what we said we would do.
I guess when I look at the report, I think that is there anywhere that you might make a recommendation, because you've seen, like you're auditing different councils and stuff, that might be helpful, that like we may not have raised something within our reports, but you see something over here working really well with another council, it may be a suggestion that this is one of the things that in future we might look at. Do you ever make, or do you just stick to either to what we put in front of you, to review and what you've seen? Because what I'm thinking about, we've just, some of the recommendations we've had this morning, say IT, there might be something working fantastically well somewhere in the world, and it's easy and simple and gives us better, but only you know that because you've audited somewhere else. So it's that kind of thing, not just that, but it might be in other areas.
So we definitely bring our experience from all the other councils. Our councils are different and the circumstances are all different, but we definitely bring that experience with us when we look at it, and that's where these recommendations and things, it definitely impacts on it.
I'm just going to ask if you can in the report, it talks about the audit opinion being an unmodified audit opinion, and then it's on page 4. And then on page 10, it talks about an unqualified audit opinion. So could you just explain for the record what the difference is? Thanks.
I just want to make sure I'm on the right. So the unmodified opinion would mean that it's unqualified. So if we materially we say that everything has been checked and everything has basically passed the bar. We've got a non-standard audit report, and that refers to that emphasis of matter paragraph that we've got in that report with regards to the water reforms. So non-standard report, but non-standard report and unmodified audit opinion. That's right. Does that answer?
Yeah, well, it just says in one point it talks about an unmodified, and then another it talks about a non-standard, including an unqualified. So, although
the one talks about the report and the one talks about the opinion. The opinion would say that everything materially has been checked and everything is correct, materially correct. But the report is not a standard report because it's got the emphasis of matter paragraph. So one is opinion and one is report.
I just want to be clear, I do understand the difference. It's just when it comes across in the report, and it can actually be quite confusing for the reader if they're not used to that terminology, where it talks about an unmodified audit opinion and an unqualified audit opinion in the same document. So I'm just saying it might make sense for those that are in that space all the time, but it might not make sense to a person that doesn't read those on a daily basis.
Can you refer me to the page? No.
On page 4 for the unmodified audit opinion, and page 10.
2.1.
Oh, sorry, I think it might be page 3 for you.
Yes.
And page 9 then.
2.1.
So just something for consideration. Thank you. Any other comments on?
Just 3.3.1 tuna, the fraud risk assessment recommendation, and I see there, like it's the fraud risk assessment information that the council may find. Oh, I guess, well, hang on, no, I'll go back. That it's not, it was made in 2018 and gained better understanding of fraud risk. It made an impact on the district council. Just, it seems like, well, I might think the management comments are unlikely that it will be reviewed until 23-24 due to other priorities. It seems like like an important one, and I understand that other priorities, but I mean, we're seeing a rise of fraud through the country and everything, and I just wanted to comment about that, please.
I could perhaps comment on that, given I put that comment in. So that's not to say that what I'm trying to say is actually getting the formally reviewed policy in front of this committee to be signed off. I have to be honest and say that we've got other things to do. Having said that, the context of that is it's not that we're not doing anything about our fraud risk. So you will see on this report, I think, an update on our last internal audit that was undertaken, which was dealing with cash handling, which was identified as a high risk. I think at the last meeting, I reported to I think it was the last meeting, might have been the meeting back. I reported to the council, this committee, on the status of our IT security and what we're doing there. So high risk areas like that are still very much on our radar and still very much things that we're dealing with. All I'm saying is I don't think I'd be in a position with the things that are happening at the moment to bring the revised policy in front of you. I'd love to get that ticked off. But what I want to reassure you is it's not as though we're not looking at our environment and trying to make sure that we're managing the risks. It's about bringing that back altogether into the policy. So I appreciate and take the point that you raised, that the comment that I included on there might seem to suggest that that is not an important issue. So I think that's good feedback for me in the way that I phrased that.
And on that, are we expecting to see a number of these recommendations raised again in the current audit, because we might not have the resource to have addressed them within the time between we've received this report and then we're rolling straight into the next one?
Well, what I would hope is that where we've said we're not doing something at the moment, I expect that to be raised again. But what I would hope is that where we said we've done things or we're doing things, that there's that will come through in the report. Now, I'm not the author of the report, but there's conversations we've had with our auditors for this audit. There were definitely areas where we needed to improve. There are definitely areas that have changed in terms of performance reporting. I'm really pleased with the team and how they're picking all these things up and running with them. Things like the fair value assessment. I would hope that the report you get shows that we have moved some of these things. We may not have got them to the point that as I said before, we may not be perfect, but we take these things that we believe these are very important things, and we want to reassure you that we are taking them seriously and we are acting on them. So, but I guess the test will be when you get the next audit management report, and whether or not it reflects what I just said. It's the accountability process.
My team, the recommendation in front of us is for the information to be received and note the matters identified by Audit New Zealand in its report for the year ended 30 June 2022 and management's responses. I'm happy to move. Can I have a second, please?
Yep.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
We are now moving on to item 7.9, which is Audit New Zealand's audit proposal letters for the years ending June 23, 24 and 25. Over to you, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you. So this report essentially attaches the proposal that we have received from Audit New Zealand in relation to the annual report audits for the upcoming financial years. I would probably just alert the committee to the fees that are proposed that are higher than the fees we have had in the past, and that's included in the proposal and set out, and I'll do a brief summary in the report itself. And there'll be something that will need to be considered as part of the long-term plan and the budget session going forward. And I'll, leave it there. Happy to take any questions.
Mine's more of a statement, is around the cost of auditing. Obviously, there's been a direction from the government to require more auditing, so therefore that adds extra cost. But that also impacts on our staff and their capacity to also provide the information. So it's a bit of a double whammy in many respects, because nobody really sees the work that goes on behind the scenes by staff to provide this information. So again, I just feel it's another unfunded mandate coming down from the government in costs. Well, we're getting close to 0.5% of a rate of our rates is audit, and by the time you put the staff element in there, it will be 0.5%. So it's quite significant, and I know. And this is where I will stand on my platform and get a bit annoyed around materiality and qualitative and quantitative, and to what point, we're seeing this across not only in this part, we're seeing it in the waters as well, around the lifting of standards and regulation for how much benefit. And I know there's an expectation here that the more you do, the more trust and whatnot in the council and its accounts. But I just wonder, going to the nth degree, as to at what point it becomes unrealistic and just expensive. It's like reaching 95% of compliance in that last 5%, the cost of achieving that and the investment time to do it. And that's where I'm quite challenged by this whole audit process now, and how, and it's not your fault, this is what it's passed on to you, what you have to do. And I'm really challenged by the degree that we are going to, how granular it's getting. But if you've got a comment, that'll be great.
Thank you, Dear Adrian. Thank you, Chairman. So I had the opportunity to attend on behalf of the Chief Executive a Zoom meeting on Thursday of Chief Executives, CFOs. It was coordinated, Chief Financial Officer, sorry. It was coordinated by the Office of Auditor General. And my understanding was that it was in response to comments, obviously coming back to the office about the concern around fees. And I found the meeting to be very, very useful and timely in terms of this meeting. So I feel for my colleagues across the room because they are the messengers, but I think what was shared with Mark Maloney, I think was very, very good context. So if I could do that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Richard or Renee or Claudia, but these are my notes from that meeting. So there is clearly that concern that we have about the audits. It's replicated in many places across about the granularity of the audits, but about the cost of the audits, about whether they're adding value. That's an issue that's come up and has been discussed. What the Office Auditor General, what Mark Maloney shared with us is that there is on their radar, and Richard will probably expand this far better than me, there is on their radar a view to look at the actual audit process and look at whether it's still fit, as I would describe it, fit for purpose. Bearing in mind that it still has to achieve the standards required by the Society of Accountants. So, you know, there are those standards that happen in the same way that our building control audits have to meet IAN standards, our audits have to meet certain standards too. So whilst there are some things potentially that could change in terms of the focus, potentially around, for example, the LTP, I would imagine, there are other things that have to be done that are required for a financial audit. So I think the point is that the office is looking at that. I'm not sure about the time frame, but they're looking at that. The point was also made, two other really important points that were made, that the cost pressures on the audit process have been around for some time, and the audits have been under-recovered for some time. And he reminded us all the attendees in that meeting that 2019, the review process was supposed to have actually started about the price. But they made the decision in 2019, like many of the councils, right in the middle of the COVID, this isn't the time to make dramatic changes to fees. Councils were keeping rates increases down. The Office of the Auditor General also made that decision that, look, this isn't the time to progress that. But yeah, the Office of the Auditor General and our audit providers are faced with exactly the same pressures that we have, cost pressures that we have. You know, professional staff, availability of professional staff, retaining them, they are big challenges for them as they are for us. Might I say that I think the Office Audit New Zealand has been quite successful, and I've been very impressed at how they've got numbers on board, to be honest. And as they work through our organisation, we train, we share our knowledge. We always say, this is a bit of an internal joke that we say we help train our auditors. We know that's not true, but that's how we see it sometimes. But they've got the same cost pressures, so you can't keep the cost the same, you know, indefinitely. I think I took a lot out of the fact that they are looking at the fit for purpose audit. So they're hearing what you're saying, but they're also constrained by the standards that apply for accounting, for audits, and for service performance. So there will still be bottom lines there. The reality is we are where we are. Now they're operating under the rules that they have to operate now. And so that's how they've set this plan, as I understand it, based on that. I think the really, which I wasn't aware of, and it's through no fault of anybody else, I wasn't aware that there was an expectation from the Office of the Auditor General, as identified in the letter, of a discussion and negotiation with our auditors about that, about the audit itself, and the appropriateness of the fees, and importantly, potentially of the phasing in of the change in cost. So Renee's been very proactive, and we have a meeting set as soon as Don gets back from his much needed stress release. we will be having a discussion with Renee and the team and some of our team about fees. So, look, I don't know whether that helps you, but I found that discussion very useful last week to hear. And look, can I say in that forum, there are a lot of people saying, well, some of the things that we're saying. By the way, there was one of the councils in our region said, actually, we've sat down with our auditors and had a negotiation, and we've come out with an outcome that we thought was better than we would achieve. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. So you answered my question. This is the fees negotiable, or are the fees negotiable? So yes. Any other questions from the team? Hi, Richard, did you want to call down? Yes, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, I'd just like to make one comment just to clarify one part of what was said, and that's around the scope of the audit. So, firstly, the scope of the audit is set out by the Local Government Act. So we are a taker of the audit scope. And in terms of looking at the scope of the audit, we've previously asked the Department of Internal Affairs in 2019 and 2022 to review the scope of audits, in particular around the long-term plan. And the point there is that it's not our role to undertake that review. So aware that the sector has also signalled that recently through the remit of the Local Government New Zealand conference. So I just wanted to clarify that and just echo the point also about our audit proposal letter is the starting point. So absolutely the messaging last week was that it's a negotiation and a discussion. And there's two key aspects to that discussion. The first is around, are the audit hours identified reasonable? And the audit hours are based on an internal moderation process. So we benchmark against other councils. We look at the specific circumstances of each council. And we look at the likes of the asset base, rates revenue, different factors as we do that. And the other thing to say is that that's also subject to an external review as well to test for reasonableness. And through that process, that ought to give a level of confidence that as a starting point, those fees are reasonably based in terms of the hours and that have been identified and the underlying assumptions that support those hours. But as I've said, the office is very open about a willingness to discuss those audit hours as a basis for the fees. So that's the audit hours are the first issue. And then, as was said, the phasing is the second part of that discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So I guess my question is really back to staff, is because obviously the smoother an audit goes, the quicker it goes. So the more issues you find, the more time it takes. How are we, it's because at the end of the day, it's time that you're being charged for. So just sort of worried that we're going to have last year's was just our audit for our financials last year was very long and protracted, and there would have been an extra cost. Have we, I guess, are there learnings from the previous years to help our audit go a bit smoother, maybe, that's helped save that bit of cost? I guess it's just trying to sort of capture that.
Yes, Mary Adrian, it's very, very, it's a very good point. My goal, Melania's goal, is we might not determine the actual final fee that's negotiated, but we will try to ensure that fee is not exceeded. And that comes back to what we do and how we work. And I think, can I say, and I give credit to Claudia and Renee and Claudia for this audit. I feel that our communication's been, but to be honest, we felt a little bit bruised by that last audit, but there was a change in that process, and it was not, I'm not being critical of anybody, but I think the communication that we had at the start about what we could do and that tone of communication has been great, and we acknowledge that we can do things better. So certainly, whatever the final fee is going to be, it's our goal to make sure that we do everything we can to keep it no more than that, and preferably less. And so there is stuff that we can do. Absolutely.
Great. No, that's good to hear. The two-way.
Was there ever an intention, instead of doing a cat and mouse, this is what it could be, let's negotiate what it will end up at? Was there any intention of going, this is what we'll do it at, considering you guys delivering your side of the bargain, and then having a percentage that it could increase if we didn't meet our side of the bargain? I'm just fearful about the amount of time that's going to go into the cat and mouse negotiation around this is what it could be, let's negotiate. I get it, there are two approaches that you could take. One is the let's deal to, like, you know, let's collaborate as a whānau and come up with a final resting point, or this is it, and if you do any better, then you'll get a discount. I'm just curious whether that approach was even considered. Just a yes, no.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So what we work on a best case scenario when we work out our hours. So we work on efficient audits and efficient timings over all of those sections that we need to do. And that's why, for example, last year we would, at the end of the audit, if there were significant delays and issues, that's what when we come back for a recovery, which is also not a nice process, but the fee that we set is based on our best view of, you know, an efficient audit where we supply with, you know, all of those deliverables.
Good point. I'm okay with the collaboration. I'm just wary about the amount of time that we might spend, which could result in that money could have, you know, you might negotiate $5,000 decrease, but that's $5,000 of Don's time to get to that negotiated point. It's okay. I don't
Point noted. I'm just wary about saying things when I'm going to go into negotiation. What I would say is, I think that the communication and the common goal, I mean, that's very evident in this audit, and so I would no doubt that will carry over into these discussions.
Good to hear. So the recommendation in front of us is that the information be received and feedback provided on the proposal letter. And it would be great if the recommendation also included a note about the negotiation that's going to happen in relation to those fees. I'm happy to move. Can I have a seconder, please? Hi, Joanna is seconding. Thank you, team. Oh, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Koromana, carried. Kia ora. Oh, what a surprise. 7.10, audit engagement letter. Not over here. Over to you, Niall.
Madam Chair, thank you. So in a similar vein, we have received the audit engagement letter for the audit for the financial year ending 30th of June. That letter is attached to your report, is addressed to the Mayor, and it has been signed by the Mayor, was signed by the Mayor back in June. So this is essentially for the committee's information as that pertains to the audit that's currently underway.
The recommendation is that the audit engagement letter be received. I'm happy to move. Can I have a seconder? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Sorry that I didn't give you a chance to discuss that. You know,
it's very transgressive.
Let's move on to 7.11, which is the audit plan for the year ending 30 June 2023. Kia ora, Niall.
Yes, thank you. Again, in a similar way, we have received the plan for the audit that is presently underway for our annual report, 22-23 financial year. And I'll just note the report as read.
Are we inviting questions now?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, any questions? Sure.
Any questions from the team?
I guess for me, it's more to the audit team is what's planned, you know, how's it looking for being completed by Christmas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. By Adrian. So as you know, the audit is in progress at the moment. So we split it up this year a little bit. We had a planning, interim, a pre-final and a final to try and
fit things in a little bit better. So you'll see on page 19 and 20, we've got plan dates that could change. This is just an audit plan, but this is kind of milestone dates that we put in that we're trying to reach so that we can get to that clearance date and opinion date, which will be, if all goes well, towards the end of October. So just maybe if I can take 1 minute just to, so the risk, you'll see the risks that we've noted for this year. It starts on page 2, and maybe just to reiterate, to focus. So one of our main risks will be the revaluations of the PPE assets, same as last year. So that is our one pressure point that could have an impact. Specifically, that I can say at this point could have an impact on those dates. We are council is relying on external valuers and reports from their end, and that's kind of the one space where we just need to try to be very efficient, and there could be delays on that end, or that's where we see where there's potential risk. For the rest of the audit, everything's going well, progressing as planned. We've got a full team. Yes.
Excellent, good to hear.
I could just comment. So the valuations, or one specific provider last year was a big problem for us. So when we negotiated this timetable, our team went back to all the valuers and said, the date we give you, you have to achieve, because you caused us, they were the ones who caused us the problem. I'm not using that one anymore. So I can say that the valuations are definitely on track.
That makes everybody sleep a bit easier, doesn't it? When you're relying upon outside parties to do their part, that has a significant flow on effect to staff, and yeah, that's heartening to hear. Good.
Just a general comment about the plan. Is there anything specific in this audit plan? Sorry, is there anything in this audit plan that's specific to MPDC, or is it a generic plan for similar councils?
Madam Chair, so I'd say most of it is pretty generic. The council wouldn't necessarily all be exactly the same. I can't really comment on, but it's we do have a sector-specific direction that we've been given by our sector teams, and that's basically, you'll find most of these risk items over most of the councils. Yes.
But is there anything specific in this plan that is specific to us?
No.
Okay, thank you. And then also in terms of the timeframes that are mentioned in the audit plans across all of the different councils, do they have their risk and assurance committee included in that timeframe, or is it always just council? In terms of the decision making and the sign off of the final annual report.
Yeah.
It would be preferable for the risk and assurance committee to be included as part of that time frame. I think it was challenging when we looked at the meeting dates and that they did not quite align, because as far as I understand, you don't have a meeting between now and the end of October. Many councils do have a special meeting, which would be a couple of days or a week or so before the council meeting with final adoption.
So moving forward, is there an opportunity for that to be incorporated in the annual, sorry, not the annual plan, the audit plan, so that we have a definitive date whereby we're all on the same page about when the expectation of the Risk and Assurance Committee is, I guess the expectation is to review the results of the audit?
I think that's often happened to December, hasn't it? Because we've worked to a December time frame. Does that ring a bell? Am I correct in that thinking, Niall? Because it's
usually October.
Yeah, but we don't. Yeah, I guess it's the it's probably ratifying it at the end, because we seldom get it. I don't think I've ever passed one in October. I think it's always been running to Christmas.
It might be.
Am I thinking different things?
The opinion might come through in October.
Yeah, okay, that's what it'll be.
Management report might not come through until the
December. Yeah, that's what it is.
Just a thought for future in terms of those audit plans, whether it be possible.
We are aligning. We are endeavouring to align as part of our the meeting planning for next year. We're looking at aligning the work that we're doing in the audit so that it aligns with this committee, so that we can bring those things to this committee at the right time. So we are trying to accommodate that for the next year ahead.
That's good to
know. Any other comments?
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Just wanted to, I guess, come back to the point that I've raised a couple of times. And this item on page, or statement on page 17, that talks about how we consider compliance with laws and regulations and the general accountability statements. And then at the third bullet point, a bit lower down, it talks about the lack of probity and results of acts and omissions. And I keep coming back to the references that are made to the Tiriti Waitangi, and when they, at what point do you think they might be included in any sort of audit framework that you might be considering in the future? I don't know where that question goes to, but just reading this.
Great. Over to Audit New Zealand now, Reggie. Kia ora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hard one to answer that, but again, it comes back to, I guess, the broader framework of the audit requirements that come down to us through the Local Government Act. I think, seeing through that review of that framework would be the best starting point for that.
So just checking, if there was to be a request to influence that process, what would the process be? So what would a person need to do to influence that process so that Te Tiriti o Waitangi comes across in audit plans, as an example, so that could be reviewed and an assessment being given?
I think in the first place, worthy of, that's certainly a worthy topic that the office could give some thought to and bring some formal guidance around in terms of a response. So if this council and this committee was minded to write to the office, then that's something that this could look at more formally. Probably not that helpful for me to try and answer that on the hoof today.
Good to have a plan though, thank you. The recommendation in front of us is that the information being received and the committee received the draft plan.
Yep.
Sorry.
I'll hold tight on that, Kevin. We'll keep you in the Kuri Club for a little bit longer.
Making a recommendation on our committee that we follow that particular pointer, so that we like Audit New Zealand has heard. Are we as a committee then, or do we send it to council to say, please, we recommend this happens, and so that Audit New Zealand can take it through?
I plan to put that in my report for council to consider, and then council can determine what to do with it. So I will give a chair report in relation to this, Howie, and then it will go to council.
I guess just to add to that, I guess it's what's meeting the Local Government Act today in relation to, whereas I think the future of local government, which hasn't been fully ratified yet, that's where that will likely be the positional change, where there'll be a more legislation in the Local Government Act. But at the moment, I don't know that there's a lot there. Would that be an accurate view at this point in time? I know it's quite subjective, because it's everybody's in a different journey in the space, but the Local Government Act is the act that we must follow at the moment, and it isn't, the Te Tiriti isn't so much in the Local Government Act at this point in time. Am I correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's certainly my sense of it. But as I've indicated, very happy to test that further with the office, just to ensure that advice due today is accurate.
Because that would be my view, is the Local Government Act today, whereas the Local Government Act in a few years' time might. Yeah,
I like it. I'll still continue to on my report
absolutely.
In the spirit of don't ask.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Kapai. Awesome. So the recommendation, does that, Fire Joanne, does that satisfy you in terms of the recommendations that are here?
Oh, not completely. And it is that I understand the Act is, but there's no reason why we can't be leaders and say, let's challenge that from today's Act. And, we're not in the 2000s, or we're not in the 1990s. And just take a look at television, which I, like currently now, with Bill week on. So I think that we indicate that it's important enough for us to put it up, even if it's only if we're appealing to the Government Act today. That is not it's like if we found something in another area that poses a difficulty for us, we would not sit back and say, oh, it's not in Government Act, we won't do it. So I am saying that you will be, our council will be proactive in saying, we find this important enough that this should be changed in some way, or this should be audited in some way. The other thing is that you'll find two things. One, that it'll be supported, and two, it won't be. And then we've got more issues than we think. So,
yeah. I guess the challenge with that is from an audit perspective, their guidance is from legislation. So that will always be the base value, and I hear what you're saying, is that we can all do things. It's like giving effect to is your minimum. You can do more. I think from an audit perspective, it is about giving effect to those things, and they're not required to audit above that. That would be the only thing that you might have a view of that.
Yeah, as a former auditor as well, so I agree with you in terms of what the accounting and the auditing standards would look like in that space. However, I do think it sits in the OAG space in terms of pushing for something across the sector or across central government or local government in terms of embeddedness of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So when everyone signs to say that we will honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi, are they actually honouring founding document for New Zealand? So I agree with you. I don't think it sits in the audit space, but I do think it sits in the OAG space. And maybe one of the other actions is to raise that in the chair forum about what that direction looks like moving forward.
All I'll say is wait for the 14th of October.
It'll be entrenched.
Final comments, Marjorie?
I guess just a final comment here. When I look at the table that includes connected infrastructure, a healthy communities, vibrant cultural values. If, as an example, if I ring, which I hear just lately because I was doing something else, and ask for any kind of cultural Māori, what they have in terms of what the information office holds in Matamata. They have one line, and it is that talks about the just the name is from. That's it. We don't exist. You don't see us anywhere. And for the information centre that I believe council runs, right? Is it not associated to council, or is it contracted out?
The Matamata eyesight is operated by the chamber.
Okay, but they keep saying they have a really close relationship with council. Then I just don't think it's good enough. And so the delay, the more that we delay, or the more that we don't make it known, the longer it takes to put in place, the longer we take, unless the government changes entirely. I don't know who to, but I just want it noted. But, one line, we deserve one line. I'm sure we owned all the land before.
Sure. Interesting debate that was. So come back to the recommendation that the information be received and the committee receive the audit plan and provide any feedback, which has been done. I'm happy to move. Can I please have a seconder? Yeah, Matamata-Piako is seconding, and points noted. Thank you. Oh, what do you know, Niall? 7.12, the draft annual report for 22-23. So taken as read, well, a brief summary, if any, and then over to the committee for comments.
Sure, thank you. Yes, so the report has been circulated separately to the agenda, and I will just comment briefly in relation to the service performance, which has been an area that you will note has had some further disclosures and additional information added to it in relation to the new audit standard. What I would say that we have 32 performance measures across the activities that we report against. Of those, we have 57 performance measures, of which we achieved our target for the year on 32 of those. We partially achieved 2, and we did not achieve on 20 of those measures. We're just waiting on a couple of additional results which are not available yet. You'll see that noted in the report. So this report as it stands is with the auditors for their comment, and as was discussed previously, we'll be looking to present this to council for adoption with the audit opinion next month.
Thanks, Niall. Any comments?
Thanks for interesting reading. There's just one typo I just want to highlight on page 13. It had the bullet points, and I think it's just where it's gone to the next line and it's picked up a bullet point. It's got aerodrome for its own thing, but it's actually attached to the previous bullet point, but it's just a typo. Quite interesting financial situation, I guess, highlighting the development contribution, and when you lift the bonnet, you take the development contributions out and the other income and other revenue, and where our cash flow set for the year.
And to that point, and based on previous history, are we paying for our groceries?
Well, we reported to the committee last financial year with our reformatting of some of our financial reporting that in fact we weren't. When you take your other contributions, other one-off type transactions, other contributions and one-off transactions which don't impact our rates funding goal. So, and that's a credit to Lania to change the format to make these matters clear to you. And of course, this is one of the issues that we need to address. I mean, we're still very strong. Our balance sheet still very strong, we're still very liquid, but are we sustainable for the long term? That's the challenge that we have with our long-term plan.
Congratulations. So we don't need to sell our Auckland cheese.
Airport cheese.
Yeah, airport cheese.
They're not available to sell anyway.
I'd wait.
I'll make a couple of comments which might trigger some. So I liked on page 9 of the annual report that it says that the Risk and Assurance Committee shares the responsibility for the accuracy and the accountability of it. Heads up team. So next time it comes through in its more final version, that's what the responsibility is for us. Now within the report it talks about a risk register that's in place. Is there anything in that risk register that's alarming that we should be aware of in terms of what the risk is?
Which page are we referencing here?
Really good question. Could be after 123. Sorry, gonna have to find it. I read somewhere that says that there's a risk register in place. The page 1, 2, 3.
Oh, I think that just in terms of the annual report project itself, in terms of how this is put together. Yes.
So with that existing, is there anything in there that would cause us alarm, or that you might want to point out to us that there's some significant risk arose and this is how it's been dealt with?
I think it was probably just in relation to the point that was raised earlier about the valuations would be the highest area of risk, but other than that, it would be fairly similar to previous. Yep.
Kevin, do you have any questions? I guess one of the other areas of concern for me was on page 196 about the water non-compliance. So nothing that we can necessarily do in that space, just to via Joanne's point earlier, we do read these reports.
Water non-compliance or achieving compliance with requirements for treatment of water are going to be a factor in the long-term plan. We're seeing that now. And I guess what I'm leaving here is the implications of what we need to do and what we need to invest.
A lot more money.
Yeah, and it's risk better.
Yeah. Okay.
And to be fair, boil water notices are a precautionary measure, but they're non-compliant. Just to note that.
Just for the record, Niall, in terms of FRS 48, was it as bad as you expected it to be? Let me rephrase that. No, I'll leave it at that, actually. The reason for the committee's reference as well, Niall and I had a cordial about this after the last week in terms of what the expectation was, additional expectation in terms of staff getting their heads around what the requirement was and having the resource to be able to do it and do it well. So did it go okay?
I think so. I think we have been able to respond to the standard. You'll see that we have included quite some additional disclosures in relation to all our performance measures. So we have explained or endeavoured to explain what the intention of the measure is in terms of linking back to our overall strategy and sort of what that measure is telling our community and some of the data and the judgments that we've used to apply to those performance measures. So yeah, you will see more commentary than you have if you compare this to previous annual reports. I think in general, yeah, the team responded really well to it. And I guess, we're just awaiting that feedback from our auditors in terms of, does this meet expectations? But and I'd also be interested in any feedback from the committee in terms of how that is kind of shaping up and how we've kind of set out those sections of the report. So if there's any feedback for us on that.
I think from my perspective, I think it looks good. Any other?
Only comment that I'd make, obviously, with whether we're paying for our groceries or not, is that one of the things that council has put forward this year is to have more oversight in the financial space. Obviously, with changeover, the new mayor and new councillors, and that we perhaps didn't get the oversight that we, and that's hence with the rates rise going forward and things like that, that flow-on effect. So we are getting more accountability this current financial year to see how we are doing with our purchase of our groceries. And I guess it's the no surprises thing, because there were some, I'm understanding that there's some cost overruns that happened that probably were going to happen anyway, but there needed to be a bit of a heads up beforehand rather than just go ahead and do it. So those things we've instructed management to provide us that accountability.
This final question from me: any issue expected in achieving the deadline? Well, the 31st of, I guess that's for everybody in the room. Are we on track to achieve the statutory deadline for signing up or adopting?
Yes, I believe so.
And no issue from the audit perspective that you'd like to raise that could impact that?
Madam Chair, just as I said earlier, it's just the PPE and the valuations that could be a pressure point for us, but at this stage, we're still on track.
Okay, much. Good. So the recommendation in front of us is that the draft annual report and summary be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder? So we've got Bruce moving and myself Gary seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, Kalamana. Carried. Kia ora. Oh, poor Niall. 7.13, the limited assurance engagement in respect of the Council's debenture trust. Taken as read.
Yes, thank you.
Do we have any? I'm guessing no comments, but any comments? No. Then our recommendation, I guess, is to receive for the appointment. Yes, we received. I'm happy to move. Do we have a seconder? Yeah, Adrian seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
No.
Against? Cool, not carried. Oof. Oh no, 8.1, so the long-term plan. I'm not sure, team, whether you are staying with us for the rest of the agenda, so I'll just ask the question now, so it's not awkward. Okay, so we'll just keep going, and if you guys need to go at any stage, you'll let us know. Goodbye. My apologies, and I'll back to you. 8.1, long-term plan update.
Yes, thank you. So, as this report's titled, this is just simply an update on the progress towards the long-term plan 2024. We are getting to a point now where the timeframes and the process is becoming quite crunchy. Yeah, there's a number of work streams very much underway at present. Just yesterday, we had a call with the audit team here, and we were discussing the audit dates and the audit process to be followed. And we will be starting to flesh out sort of get some precision around those dates. So that is an area that we still need to develop. You'll note in here the indicative audit timeframes. I expect there will be some movement in that and further discussion to take place around that. And we'll be developing a really detailed timeline about the documents that will be available to audit and when that will occur. And within the body of the report, I've just set out the really key work streams of the LTP and how we're progressing against those. And yeah, generally, we're broadly on track with the program as set out. You'll see that there's been a couple of changes, and I've noted those. And yeah, in terms of sort of the next steps over the coming weeks, the operational budgets have been prepared and gathered from managers internally, and we will be having some council workshops on the budgets as a whole next month, so that will start to shape that financial direction. Yeah. And I have just included it within the body of the report, a discussion around the Three Waters reform, because that does have quite significant implications for the LTP. Now that the legislation has passed into law, there's a number of transitional arrangements that we need to be aware of in terms of setting this LTP. And I'll just, essentially set those out. So things will look a bit different to how they were in the prior LTP, in terms of some of the things that we don't have to include as we previously would have, and so on. And I guess if there's any changes that fall out of a change of government administration in October, then that will be an area of risk. And we've noted that. And that will apply, of course, to all councils or territorial authorities as well. So yeah, happy to take any questions on the update report.
Everyone looks pretty happy.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot of effort going into it and a lot of effort to come. So well done, team. I need to give you a chocolate fish now, because that's the first time I've ever seen in a report that comes to a risk and assurance meeting the Mitchell crunchy. Oh, maybe I need to give you a crunchy. That's right. So any other questions? No? Sorry, much apologies, much here.
Just wanted to note again, I guess for the table, it says demographic growth and economic data and information. I still believe that that's data is avoid of the almighty data that I've faced a number of times. So just want to bring back to the attention. I think the next one is community outcomes vision review. Later in that table, it talks about the iwi aspirations work and whether that was going to be fed through to the vision review process that has been completed, I see, in June.
Yep, so we've got the strategic direction that the council has previously signed off. we're planning on doing anything further with that. But as noted, there have been the Mana Whenua Forum have fed up to council some iwi aspirations. And what's proposed to occur is that there's a further dialogue between the council and the Mana Whenua Forum around those iwi aspirations. And we're looking at, I think, in February, March next year, convening a hui to discuss that further. And I guess, yeah, whatever falls out of that, we'll consider.
Would you like to comment at all on the LTP process? Just in terms of, I mean, it's okay if you don't, that's fine. No, fine. Awesome. So the recommendation in front of us will be, I think, to receive the report. Oh, so the information be received and provide feedback on the LTP project. So I'm happy to move. Can I have a seconder? James is you're doing the seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, Mana carried. Okay. Well done, Niall.
How updated is our thermometer on the wall here?
That needs a bit more of an update. So the overall one will have gone up from below 20%. So yeah, we will update that.
Yeah, just thought I'd highlight it that it's not the true indication of where it's at the moment. It's time, eh, Niall?
Yes, indeed. We've been busy doing the work. We've been updating the thermometer.
That's all good. Thank you. Yeah.
Kia ora team, we are on to item 8.2 on the agenda, which is the review of progress with external and internal audit recommendations. Welcome, Nadia. Kia ora.
Good morning, everyone. So this item was really at a request of the chair to keep any recommendations that have been made in previous reports sort of front of mind and see how we're progressing with those issues. So we'll bring this back as a standing item each meeting, keep you up to date on that. So this is our first go at it. So if you've got any feedback on the process, then please share. But yeah, the two reports recently was obviously the management report from Audit New Zealand. So a lot of the comments that we have in here sort of reflect what was comments against the report. But we'll also try to be upfront about the timing that we can achieve. We obviously can't do everything all at once, especially with all the priorities that are going on at the moment. So try to be realistic about timing. And you also see we've, there's some comments that we may have a differing view, but we're obviously always we'll do what we're told to do. So, so if you see there's one in there particularly around sense of expenditure policy. In my view, of maybe we need to tweak our policy to be a bit more clearer as to what counts what, but it's your policy, it's your call. So yeah, we'll take advice on that.
So I'm quite fascinated about that one because it comes down to the mayor signing off the lunches for our meetings. Is that really that sensitive? Because it's not significant. It's not like we're dining out. So I'd really struggle with the granular of to that point where surely the dollar amount at the that there's some balance.
My personal opinion on it is that we've got really clear limits in our policy, and we've got obviously processes that we follow to get expenditure approved. So personally, I feel like we've covered it, but yeah, I think we'll have a different view on that one. Yeah.
Could I have some explanation around that then, perhaps for me to better understand it? Might be the appropriate question to ask.
Yeah, I think through Madam Chair, I think Claudia can perhaps help me as well, but it's one of those areas where we work against the best practice guide, and we basically go through the best practice guide and just highlight where there's differences. So absolutely noting that in some cases, as I said earlier, our councils will differ, but we basically report against that guidance. I don't know if there's anything more. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's basically it's okay, but best practice is the target. Yep. Okay.
And so in that case, we would acknowledge that best practice reflects that the mayor should sign off, but we have decided that that would be an administrative burdens and therefore not necessary. So the option is there as well. That's
I guess when we do review our sensitive expenditure policy, we're always careful that we're not tripping it, like creating a whole another workload for ourselves and potentially trip ourselves up. We want to make sure that we're doing enough to meet the expectations of the policy, and that the key thing with the sensitive expenditure policy is the newspaper test. That, we want to be above public scrutiny.
When I saw this chart, and I went to the disagree with the recommendation areas that you've highlighted, and I just had to wonder, do you get to talk with the whoever made the recommendation and stuff so that you can come to an agreement, or is that blocked off to you? No?
Yeah, no, we have that ability, and when the audit, the management report is issued by audit, we get a chance to put our comments in there and have a discussion on them as well. So sometimes you just agree to disagree on something, but that's about it.
So in terms of feedback, I'm happy that the report's coming through. I'm happy with the format because it gives us that visibility or that transparency. And I think this was initiated because Audit New Zealand had talked about prior recommendations that had been raised, and it felt like we were a little bit blind to that. So thank you for doing this. I think Bruce has got a comment, so I'll have it.
Oh, this one, when we talk about sensitive, I can appreciate it, all right? That, they say, the councillors are dining out on, all sorts of things. But if we have set limits as a council, it's the administration in the governance group to do it. I don't see why we should be doing a sign off. If we've signed it off to say we will set a limit, right? Why are you asking the mayor to sign off after each meeting?
So through Madam Chair, so it's some of the councils, a practical way to do it is to also do it monthly in a batch. Things that's classified as sensitive expenditure, to have it past the proper delegation level.
Lunch is a sensitive.
And what I heard from that, that there is scope for us to utilise the council's risk appetite in relation to, do we meet the 100% standard of the best practice, or do we make a judgment call that is transparent about what we're going to do? So that's what I've heard from them.
I think there's more important things to worry about.
No.
So I think I just think it's useful, and that our auditors do bring up issues. And I hope that it's reassuring to you that they do. And one of the questions earlier was about, do you look at what other councils do? And so, personally, I don't have a problem if we disagree. I find it challenging when we do, because it forces me to rethink things and see whether we should improve. We might conclude, as Anya said, that we actually disagree on this issue, and it might come up again. But for you, as our governance group, we are certainly more than happy to be challenged on what we do, and we want to reflect your risk appetite.
Okay, so thank you.
I'd kind of like to know how many more other things like that are actually being audited, because if there are a few of them, that's a lot of extra work that auditors have to do that maybe they don't need to, or we don't think they don't need to.
I think Renee was going to say she'll do what she needs to do to meet the auditing standard. Yeah. Yeah, so thank you for that, Kevin. Lania, did you have any other comments in relation to that?
No, just I guess we hadn't, the committee hadn't seen our comments back on the internal audit report that was done on the cash handling. So yes, just wanted to highlight there that we have anything that we the limit urgent nature was dealt with straight away around the physical cash security, and the other things are sort of progressing as we can.
Yeah. And I guess to follow on around the fraud risk and assessment, that it hasn't been progress, but some work has been undertaken. So that process is already occurring. we're already undertaking a change to improve practice. So while it hasn't, the assessment hasn't progressed itself, there has been steps taken. So that's good to see.
Yeah, and I think it's in the audit plan for this year, right? So
It
there'll
is.
be an assessment in relation to what is required in terms of best practice and where we're at on that journey. So, thank you. So, sorry, Lania, did you have another comment? Otherwise, the recommendation in front of us is that the report be received. I'm happy to move, very happy to move this one. Thank you. Can I please have a seconder?
Yes.
So, I, Joanne, is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Cool, carried.
I think actually just as a further note to this, with the change in committee, because you haven't been the previous year, this is actually gives the continuity of what's happened previous before you've come on. So I think that's, and it's easy to forget stuff too. So it's a really good process. So thanks, Jadine, for recommending that.
So thank you. On 8.3, we have the risk and assurance program to be taken and read. Thank you, Lania. So I'm happy to receive this. Are there any comments? I'm seeing there's no comments. Sorry, I might just make an overarching comment in that I saw that there are a number of reports that we were expecting this time that we didn't see this time, and so hoping that we will see those in the next week. So thank you, team. Happy to move. Can I please have a seconder? Yes. Adrian seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Mana. And so we're going to go back to an earlier item on the agenda, which was 7.7, the risk and assurance self-assessment. So in accordance with our charter, we need to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, in summary. I have put forward a draft self-assessment. So I want to be clear that it is a draft, and the reason for it being on the agenda today is for committee members to provide feedback on that draft, which may or may not alter the self-assessment. And once we have agreed it, then you will be sent it via a SurveyMonkey link for completion by the 6th of October. So that's my summary. Do we have any questions or additions or deletions in relation to the Risk and Assurance Committee self-assessment?
It didn't look too onerous.
That looks good. Because it's our opportunity to reflect on asking ourselves the question. What I would say is when you are completing it, the more time that you put into the comments would really help us improve the performance of this committee to support council.
And I guess those that have been on it before, having that opportunity to reflect on the past and where we are today too in this journey, because we've had a Risk and Assurance Committee for a few terms now.
The independent person, the position that I fulfill right now, I wondered, I didn't see one, but I wondered if there should be a question in there about that. It's interesting about sometimes people that understand process and everything is a really good place to be sitting in this position. And sometimes it's a really good place to be when you don't understand anything that's going on in council, because you have a view that what are they doing, or like what's happening, and so you bring a totally different perspective. And I am of two minds, because I come from that view, then got to be in the chair for a while, and so and I wonder if it's helpful when I'm kicked out of this position, what the committee might hold, and sometimes I don't think that it's it might be helpful that you have a person not involved in business, in the business of policy and stuff like that, to be asking those questions. So I'm unsure about that, and I wondered if that belonged in someone.
It's quite fascinating, because in the Taxpayers Union stuff that they do, and they talk about the composition of a risk or audit and risk committee, or in our case, a risk and assurance committee. And one of the questions asked is, yes, do you have an independent chair? Yes. Another one was, is there a lawyer on board. Now, I don't know, that was one of the things though, is do we need a lawyer? So I'm fascinated to understand that conversation around a risk and assurance committee, because what skills do we need? Yeah, and that's where I'd be interested from the audit perspective, of what the composition around of risk and assurance committees. Yeah, because obviously as councillors, we all bring different perspectives, and we are just generally lay people with some kind of business background. But it's a lottery, and sometimes when you put the people on the audit risk, it depends on the composition of your popularity vote in the council, to put it bluntly. So yeah, I guess that's the thing around the independent, is what other perspective don't we have around the table that we need?
Yeah, and that's a really good point from both. So what we could do in the survey is ask the question around the composition of the committee and the skills. So the question is usually something like, does the committee have the prerequisite skills to undertake its responsibilities under the charter? And then the comment box, if there are any skills that are missing, what do you think they are? We could include that. So any
feedback from audit?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the specific question around having a lawyer as part of the committee, certainly the Office of the Auditor General wouldn't have a view that a lawyer is necessary per se. It's more the direction I think that you're signalling around. It's the committee itself to determine what skill set it needs based on the risks that it faces and that it's trying to manage for that particular council. So I think your direction in terms of testing that amongst yourselves via this mechanism is very valued and worthwhile, and will come out of that visibility around the skill set that you do actually feel that you need.
Thanks.
No, it was really more about what my answer would be, I suppose, because I see the risk committee identifying the possibility of something to be looked at, and it doesn't need to be somebody with that specific skill here. It would be saying, I think we need some legal opinion on this, and to then go back.
Exactly.
All right. So so I that's how I see it.
It's like putting an accountant on it, but it's numbers are an important thing, so it is important to have some numbers acumen around the table.
Do you think that we can cover that point off by asking a question around the composition of the committee? Do we think that the composition of the committee enables us to meet the requirements of the committee under its charter? 1 to 5, so ranging between strongly agree to strongly disagree, and then any comments, and that's when that free text could come in terms of we could consider this. And then once the results come out, then we can have a discussion around the table.
Yeah, because that was only just my opinion.
Any thoughts on that in terms of adding that question?
I have no problem with you putting the question.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Anything, so thank you for that. Anything else that we see as a deal breaker that might not be there?
Well, I just ask, is this, how similar is this survey to the previous year's ones, just in terms of comparability of the data and being able to track over time?
Yeah, good question. So not as I don't know whether you've got the previous one, but there were a lot of questions that were asked.
I noticed it was much longer.
Yeah. Whereas I guess the hope this time is that we get what you might call the crunchy comments coming through, which will enable us to determine whether we're doing okay, and also enable us to give feedback to the people that provide reports to this committee about what we could do better in that space, which to my understanding was what the expectation of this assessment would do. So I agree with you, it's not necessarily going to be directly comparable, but I think it's a way forward for us to figure out what we need to keep doing, stop doing, start doing.
That's absolutely fine. I don't have any issue with that. This is effectively up to the committee, but it was just that in the past, having compiled the results, and you have the trend over time, and so obviously this time starting off, we would just be starting off fresh, and we can track from here. Yeah, that's just.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, so even though the recommendation, so I'm going to change the recommendation to say that we receive the self-assessment, provide feedback, and that we complete the self-assessment by the 6th of October. And then one more thing, which is to add in a question in relation to the composition of the committee.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if I can move that. So can I please have a mover and a second? So Bruce is moving. And by Joanne is supporting. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? To a vote. Very good. I think, is that us? I think that's us, team. So well done. Ever important lunch is here. I don't know who's But thank you again, team. We got through a very long agenda. Thank you to the team as well that provide the reports for our consideration. Thank you for our manahiri today. And if you don't mind, Matua Gary, if you could close out hui with karakia, we'd appreciate that.
Me mihi anō tēnei kia tata. Ko oti pai tō tātou nei kaupapa te rira. Kei nui tata. Rere kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te ata whai o tō tātou arikia he uraiti. Me te aroha o te atua, te pipina tahi tamai. Ki te wairua tapu. Ake.
Kia ora team. Bring lunches in the kitchen and travel safe, everybody. Thank you, JB.
I think Anne
Feel free to share my lunch with yourselves.
Are you coming through tomorrow?
Yeah,
Coming through tomorrow?